Hello, I'm Colette Robbins, and this is Sophie Kahn. We are the hosts of File Exchange. We are a hybrid digital analog couple of artists who, during the pandemic, discovered a void in the discourse for artists using digital tools. So we created this channel, File Exchange, and File Exchange is a space for artists using new technology to connect, share their ideas, tools and tips revolving around what it's like to be alive and using 21st century tools in art. So you all get to be a fly on the wall for these hour-long conversations. And Sophie is going to introduce our guest today.
Yeah, welcome to File Exchange and welcome Susan Silas. We are excited to be talking to you today. I think Susan and I, well, we've known each other for a while. I want to say, did we meet at the Bitforms show? Or did we meet prior?
I might have met prior to that, but just very peripherally.
Yeah. I think I'll say I got to know Susan and her work better when we showed together in an exhibition at Bitforms in 2018, curated by Susan and by Claudia Hart. It was called Out of Body, Sculpture Post-Photography, and continued having some really great conversations with Susan after that time because she has a very lengthy history in photography and video and sculpture, and her work really spans a breadth of media. The work that she had in our show at Bitforms was drawn on 3D scans of her body. It was the Aging Venus project. Is that right?
Yeah.
And a marble sculpture and beautiful large renders behind my work, which was a really interesting pairing. And so yeah, I'm really interested to hear more from Susan on how she's considering 3D in relationship to photography and sculpture, and her imaging of herself, her thoughts about the female body, art history. And I think there'll be a lot of really interesting crossovers. So welcome, Susan. We're happy to have you.
Well, thank you. It's interesting. I feel very honored to be included in this series, especially because I've watched the others and I'm aware that of the group of people that you're interviewing, I'm going to end up being the Luddite for sure. Like you'll see when we get to showing the pictures, it'll be a dead giveaway because you'll be looking at me on my screen in preview. You know, it's like, but it's been really interesting to see the generosity of the previous exchanges in terms of sharing tech and the kind of support that these women are giving each other, because I think that the art world in general, and particularly the traditional one, is very guarded, protective, ungenerous, all of those things. And so it's been fascinating for me to watch this. On the other hand, the people watching me today are probably, I think the ones who might benefit the most are the people who are a little afraid to get into this, because they may get to see that with help, right, you can get into it somehow anyway.
Absolutely.
And collaboration.
About that actually just before we started our recording, in that, you know, I am not a hacker, I'm not a coder. I'm not a coder. I'm mechanically incompetent. You know, it's really, actually, it's so embarrassing. It's like something breaks in my house. I could spend 30 minutes trying to repair it, or I could go to my husband and be like, hey, what's wrong? And he'll just look at it and he's an engineer.
And fix it.
So I say that actually all the time. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting conversation to be had around like hiring modelers, about how you have those conversations, what you're directing them to do, what you look for, because increasingly these skills have become so specialized. Like I outsource some Zbrush, I outsource 3D on the web, I outsource rendering sometimes. You know, we're all hiring people. None of us are kind of doing, you'd be insane to do it all yourself.
Right.
So not only
my husband.
But yeah, I think it's interesting. Absolutely. I love that you said that. I think it's interesting for artists to feel that there isn't any shame, because look at artists.
That's why I got started. Somebody helped me. Like I didn't grow this. I don't have a background in any software. In fact, I was terrible with it. And it was only when I realized that I could realize some ideas, sculptural ideas, because I was a painter, that I started listening. My husband he's been an early adopter with every piece of software. He started working with Photoshop when he was 12 or something, whenever it first came up, and he is just you know, a savant with tech, with software specifically. He's not a coder. But he started showing me what was possible. And this was back in like 2012. And I couldn't look back. I had to learn it. So then I did learn some of it so that I could learn more from him. It was
Right.
like, it was a way to communicate with him and keep growing. And then it just kind of grew into this own thing, but he still will help here and there with some like technical questions or teaching me a new piece of software or getting me in, you know, and it's like, we all need people in every phase of our careers and lives. And I think there's this mythology of the
fabricators, you know, foundry.
right. But there's this mythology of the individual that came from 20th century, you know, paradigms of like what it meant to be an artist. And like, even you look at Picasso, he wasn't doing that alone. The only reason why his work was able to develop was because of his community and because of being exposed and connecting with different makers, different people using different tools. So I think this is it all. I feel like this is an important episode of File Exchange to talk about these things and to kind of, you know, lift up the hood and understand that it's not all this like we're all magicians and just jumping in the software like, woo, I know everything. That sometimes it's about collaborating.
Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the examples for me is that I taught very early on in my career at NYU, but I wasn't making enough money. And so I ended up shifting my quote day job into the film business. And that's a very different model because the director, right, me in this case, in a sense, knows what they want and doesn't necessarily know how to do everything you need to do to get there. You have a crew, I mean, in a production, you have a crew of, you know, some 100 people making this thing happen.
Yeah.
Right. And so it felt to me like at some point I sat down and thought, well, I can try to do these things and function like a director and pick, quote, a crew who can help me realize those things, or I cannot do them because you mentioned that 2018 is the first time I showed something that was based on that kind of digital technology, 3D technology.
Yeah, so
I was 65, right? It's like, I don't have years to do the learning curve anymore. It's too late. Like I walked into it too late. And I do remember, and I have people all over the place that I work with. I have someone in California, I have someone in Iceland. And I remember it asking my Zbrush person, how long did it take you to get really good at this? And the answer was 10 years. And I thought, well, I can't wait till I'm 78. It's just not in the cards. You know, it's like, I don't know if I'll be alive then. Like, so it really became, I mean, the one disadvantage, I think there's a pro and a con to this. The disadvantage to not knowing the software in some intimate way is that there are possibilities that you don't know about and thus don't ask for. However, the pro side to me seems to be that sometimes what I decide to do doesn't look as much like some of the things coming out of new media because I don't know.
Yeah.
That, you know, that it has both a good and a bad side to it. And I do feel envy at times, like, you know, there are times where I'm working with the Zbrush person where I wish I could just like take over and do it myself.
Well, there's also, I mean, I teach beginning Zbrush, so we can all
come.
Yeah, like, because honestly, like a lot of, that's so interesting you're saying this because I teach at the New York Academy of Art. And so I'm teaching Luddites. I'm teaching a lot of people have never touched, I have all age groups, people who have never touched software, and then people who have touched software. I have a whole range of people in my classes there. And the idea in that class is not to become a master in any piece of software, but rather to just jump in and learn some of the basic concepts and foundations around 3D, which is a language. And that's it. That took me, you know, a pretty long time, but it's still, I've been in it, what, 8 years now. And I feel like I can do quite a lot, but I still feel like there's always stuff to learn, but you can still learn the kind of basic foundation of it. And so I do think there's a way in without being a master. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've talked to other people who've done that, actually, who've just done a beginning class, not so that they would do it themselves, but so that they would have better grounding in the possibilities.
Yeah.
But I have so far been able to do pretty much what I've wanted. And interestingly, the person that I work with a lot is this young guy named Clyde Cabanban, who was at Pratt and who I got hooked up with through Carla Gannis, actually, your first interview, I think, right? And I've been working with him ever since, and he's just lovely. But the other great thing that's happened is he has been working in various industry jobs in California. And so by chance, his learning curve in certain new things and what I want to do have dovetailed so that I'm getting to take advantage of what they're training him to do, you know, in the commercial end of the business. So it's been kind of amazing because we're now doing a video in Unreal Engine together.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so I'll show you a couple of stills from it. But the great thing is that when we started it and he suggested doing it, he knew barely anything about it. And then, like literally a week later, he got onto a huge project in Unreal Engine and they're teaching him the whole thing. And so by chance, I have profited by,
that's great.
You know, this coincidence, you know, where he's really, you know, made leaps and bounds in terms of his learning curve. And because he's kind of he's a young, I shouldn't say he's a kid, but he's a young kid in a way, and really smart and capable. And he, you know, he knows enough software by now that he just learns this stuff really fast.
Well, the thing is, once you learn the foundations, you can basically apply to any piece of software. Like I just had to learn Substance for the recent pieces that I've been working on, Substance Painter, and it was not a piece of software I'd explored before. But compared to some of the other pieces of software and knowing the language and what the terminology meant, same with Sophie. I mean, she's been jumping into Substance as well. It's like, can I be a master of it and know every single thing? Absolutely not. But can I work my way around it and play with it and start to kind of build my skill set there? And I think that's what's so interesting. It's kind of like once you learn color theory, being able to apply that to painting, to drawing, to sculpting, to installation or video. So I think it's all kind of connected, and that's what's so exciting too, is like applying those that knowledge like that you have in your background into the collaboration with these tools, because that's what I feel like with software is it's a collaborative tool as well. It's pushing back. It has limitations and opportunities and possibilities. But yeah, we'd love to see the stills. Can you?
So let's, if we share, I'll go through actually a bunch of things. But one thing that I think maybe Sophie said in the beginning is that I came from photography. Also, I've done a lot of writing, and you know, I wouldn't say it's literature, but it's of a literary type, I think, of writing, the way I write, and a fair amount of video. I did some kind of sculptural things when I was younger, and then I sort of stopped. So the work ended up being primarily photographic based, and except for the live cast of my face, which I've been doing for a long time. So one of the funny things is that, because I listened to you talking to Aurea a little bit, and you had said that you do see your work and the 3D work in relation to photography. And I almost see the 3D images as photographs in a weird way, like, because to me, what's happening is that all of my work has a relationship to the index and to iconicity, that everything looks like me because I'm photographing myself. And also that everything starts in real space with a live capture of some kind. Right. So nothing is constructed in the computer before there's a live capture. And as a consequence, that data file, which gets pushed out, as you'll see in a minute, in a number of different directions, you know, including things I call drawings, which are really photographs that are, you know, computer generated, and, you know, motion capture, and sculpture, all of it feels to me like it centers on this way in which the index is becoming slippery because it's become a data set.
Yeah.
Right?
I
So,
agree, actually.
you know, like starting with Roland Barthes as my sort of Bible as a young person, right? And thinking about, you know, what the meaning of the index is, and seeing now that it's something different because, and yet at the same time, these things retain an iconic resemblance to me in all their permutations.
I mean, I feel like a scan, like the idea of the indexicality of a scan, you know, that this laser beam touches the person, then it bounces back into the lens, and then it's captured. You know, the difference to me has been really interesting, and it's kind of a little hard to articulate. But when I started doing my series, The Divers, where I was collaborating with Butoh performers, they brought a sort of sculptural sense to the way that they pose their bodies, and they're so used to performing. Particularly my one collaborator, Azumi Oe, she told me afterwards that she was so used to performing in the round that she had a sense of how her body looked from every angle. And so that was amazing as somebody new to sculpture, very familiar with photography, because I always still feel that I'm framing. I always feel that my 3D scans have a best angle. Do you know what I mean? So there's still that still sense of something happening in like one singular decisive moment. And the sensibility that she brought, that I think made the sculptures much stronger, was an awareness of it in the forward
body in the round.
So that's been the one thing that's kind of been a surprise for me in moving from a sort of photographic. A filmmaker wouldn't have that. A filmmaker would be,
if it's still flat.
It is flat
though. Moving, but it's flat.
It's moving, but it's flat. So but I agree. And we were talking in like another, that might have been that episode that we did with Aurea about like how heartbreaking it is for me that photography spaces don't accept what I do as photography. Like I take it personally, you know.
Really? I mean, it's so strange to me because it's an extension. I mean, I know Aurea was pushing back about that in terms of her own practice. She doesn't consider it.
She doesn't see it that way.
Which I thought was really interesting. And I think, you know, it's all our philosophies are going to be different about that. But for Sophie's practice, I definitely see it as an extension of photography and a new like post-photographic way. I mean, it's post in the sense that, you know, photography isn't, you know, with these particular sculptures is not being used, but it's still a photographic process. It's it's fascinating.
Also for me, I came about doing the capture, right, to get an object file in two different ways. The first, if you want to share me, I'll show you the first set.
So you can actually share your screen.
Oh, I can.
You just go ahead and and it should allow you to. I've changed the settings. Let me know if it doesn't.
Let's see.
So whichever screen you want to share. Nice.
Okay, here we go.
Nice.
So basically, the first time I did a full body scan, it wasn't a scan, it was done through photogrammetry, which is different. It was totally camera oriented, and it was me getting on a plinth, right? I went down to Baltimore because this guy down there had a, I think it was called Direct Dimension. He had a
I know that
photogrammetry rig, right? Harry Abrams. So you basically are standing in a space surrounded by cameras from head to foot on poles that go around you in a circle,
like 40,
right? And they fire simultaneously.
Oh, cool.
Right, and then a software stitches them together into a 3D object file. So the very first thing I did, which was called Aging Venus, was started that way. It was not scanning my body, it was doing it through photogrammetry. And this freeze, which is what I call it, shows you essentially, you know, in 2 dimensions, the various different angles that were captured to create the image that becomes this sculpture, right? And then the sculpture, which is a 24-inch high marble that was CNC milled and then polished by hand for about a month, and which I still like to do a little more polishing on, frankly, but I need a really techie person to help me with that. Was shown at Bitforms. So this is like a 24-inch high marble. And again, you know, the same object file generated this image. And then the thing I discovered is that I was working with Clyde, and in Maya, we could put the object file into a space and take portraits of it, right? So it wasn't photographing the sculpture, right? As one might think that's a possibility too, right? It was actually photographing the file. And the upshot of that was this, which was a very big photographic image on what's called silver paper. So it was 60 by 40.
Can we see
Beautiful.
the if you can zoom in? Just for the video.
How would I, wait, hold on a second. I might have to.
Yeah, I don't have a Mac, so I don't know anything about.
There, I'm on the dark.
There we go.
Oh, we can't see it. You might have to do a different.
Oh, it's not in the share when I open it this way.
You have to share a different screen.
Okay, let's see if I can, because maybe we'll want to do that with other things. Let me stop the share.
Yeah, we definitely want to.
And we can edit this out. Actually, while you're doing that, I'm going to turn on my AC.
Okay, so.
Yeah, take your time.
No, it's still showing this. What I'd like to do.
We'll try it again because now it's your whole screen.
Oh, it is. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's see. Now, can you see the bigger image?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So you can move it to the center, like you can.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So this.
So I'll cut this, and if we can just do like 3 seconds of silence, it makes it a little easier for me to blend the audio.
Gotcha.
So I'll just be like 3.
Okay.
So this is the image that was shown also at Bitform. So this is 2018. This is the very first time I've waded into this territory, right? Like I knew virtually nothing. And I did have help from Michael Reese, who was really terrific because he had been involved with these people in Garfagnana doing a project called Digital Stone. And he was the one that recommended me going there to try and produce the marble. And so there were, you know, I was actually getting help from a lot of people who were much more well-versed in new media than I was, you know, and who were very generous actually. So this was the first thing. The next thing I'm going to show you, I'm going to play like a minute of it after I sort of introduced it, is a motion capture video called Eulogy. And this actually came about because my 95-year-old mother, who lived in her own house and was with it to the end, died at the age of 95 in her, you know, at home, which is the best way you could possibly go. And all 3 siblings gave a eulogy at her funeral. And after that, I started fantasizing about what people would say at my eulogy about me. And that kind of segued into this whole thing about, well, maybe my avatar should give a eulogy for me, right? So then there was the question of designing an avatar that would represent me, and which I'm going to show you in a second. And so I got that done. And then the thing kind of morphed a little to a more generalized discussion about immortality and art and all those things. I'm going to just play you a tiny bit of it. And this is available on my website so that if people, you know, want to go look at this, they can. I'm just going to play like a minute.
Oh, sure.
Who would mourn her when she was gone? More importantly, who would preserve her life's work? She was worried about her legacy. She wanted to be famous. Isn't that what all artists wanted? It was their ticket to immortality for centuries. When she realized that the end was getting closer, she turned to me in an attempt to distinguish herself from the otherwise boundless mass of under-recognized artists striving for their 15 minutes of glory.
So this,
But of
right,
course,
which we can now stop.
things have changed.
so this project, right, involved also Clyde, right? But it involved me figuring out, okay, so what are the steps going to be to get to a motion capture, which involved, recording myself on a teleprompter, which, required, obviously, I had a face scan done. We had to model the hair with a Zbrush person. I ended up doing a little bit of tweaking of the sound, actually, in a real sound studio. So all of that was part of the package of figuring this out. And then once I had this avatar, which kind of stemmed from this gorgeous girl here, what I did was I went online and I basically Googled sci-fi hairdo, right?
Yeah.
I mean, literally. And I looked at zillions of hairdos, trying to figure out, like, what's my avatar going to look like? And I came across this gorgeous creature here, as you can see. And it's this insane hairdo, which became the hairdo for my avatar. And then here's one of the ways that I've used Keyshots. So I have had like the Zbrush person or stick this thing in Keyshot, and then I downloaded Keyshot Viewer, so I can now look at it in the round as a theoretical thing, change all the angles and all of that. But it's really, I'm not making anything in there. I'm actually only using the viewer as a tool, right?
Right.
And then of course this thing was incredibly sculptural, right? And so the next thought was, well, let's turn this actually into a sculpture. And usually I think I have it in another file, I'm not here, I'll show you, but I start with a small model, like tiny, like they're on the table, you can kind of see them behind me.
Nice.
Then I went, this is now this to scale at 24 inches high. So this is a CNC milled piece of foam model.
Oh, okay.
And from this model in a foundry in Philadelphia came this wax. Right. So this is the lost wax process. This is like the most traditional kind of art, macho art making in a foundry, pouring bronze, right, kind of thing. This is another view of the model together with the wax.
Wait, so how was the model? Was it machine made, the model, or was it hand?
The model itself was machine made. It was based on an object file.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, the same basic object file that was used to make the video I just showed you.
Okay.
Right. So their origins, once again, are the same.
Digital, yeah.
Then this became this 24-inch high white bronze sculpture.
White bronze. I've never seen that.
Yeah. So the highly polished sculpture. So this is now in my studio, and I'm having people over to see it along with a couple of other things at the moment, especially since the Elizabeth Foundation is soon to have a set of open studios. So I'm trying to set up
in October.
Nice.
Yeah. I miss EFA. I was Susan and I were never actually neighbors. I was at EFA.
We were never there at the same time. I know, which is a shame.
I know.
Then with my Zbrush guy, we came up with two variations on this sculpture. This is the avatar bending sideways. Here you can kind of see it as a Keyshot, again, me playing with Keyshot to see like, what does this look like?
Love the reflection.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
The mirrored reflection is fun. And I could see this a bit as a big photograph too, without any qualm.
Absolutely.
And then I think what will happen with this one is that it will be cast in glass.
Oh, beautiful.
Ooh.
Right. And I'm going to show you something else that's already being cast in glass. Then I also did one called Avatar Bending Forward. And this one is actually being cast in bronze as we speak and is almost done. So this is from the foundry, like confirming our measurements. And this one is being done in a slightly different white bronze that's more white and silver, kind of, called Tombasil. And I'm excited to have this happening. This is the model. They were showing me the parts of it, right? Because everything has to be approved, because this particular foundry is all the way in Tempe, Arizona.
Oh.
So everything, is done kind of online. So here we have our, model.
Wax. Yeah.
And then this is the wax.
Oh, that's the wax. Okay.
This is, you know, made from that model.
Mhm.
And now the bronze has been poured and is being polished.
Right.
Ooh,
So that's a kind of exciting
That's
thing.
really
so
cool.
exciting.
Yeah.
Then with, again, back to me and Keyshot, which I love.
Yeah, I
This
love
is
Keyshots.
a sculpture called Beauty, and it's basically me with a corona of coronavirus. So the
yeah.
hair is one of the first sort of shared versions of the of coronavirus spikes that was running around, which actually another 3D artist, Ashley Zelinsky, had found and let me use, right? So here I get to kind of look at all of the ways this thing might look in, you know, in the round, right? And start thinking about it. And it's being cast in gray glass.
Mhm.
And I'm going to show you a couple of process shots of what's happening with that. This has turned out to be extremely complicated to cast because of these spikes and how fragile they are. And we've
It
you know,
looks
we've been
like
working.
the Greek or Roman, sorry, the Roman hairstyles like that have been like over time have worn. I don't know if you know what I'm saying, with the little
Yeah.
like almost like beehive looking.
Yes, yeah. And also I feel like all of this is indebted to classicism. That's the other
Right.
thread running through this, right? Is thinking about classicism and what it means to us and how it informed our values in the West, you know, which are under a lot of scrutiny also at the moment for various reasons, both sexist and racist.
Right.
So now this is, you know, the attempted molds of this thing. It was very, very hard to get a good mold. I'm working with 2 glass artists in Red Hook on this, Dory Guthrie and Matthew Day Perez. They're wonderful. So this was one of our, you know, pulls of a wax. You can see there are 2 here. It took a long time to get it from the model to the wax without things breaking off. This is a head that we cannibalized more wax from because it wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
So cool.
Yeah, it took a long time to kind of get there.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like this looks like some artifact from, you know, an archaeological dig.
Yeah. I mean, digital, that's one of the things I've really discovered. Like I have amazing mold makers that I worked with at a foundry in Chicago, although recently I've just been printing my work and painting. But yeah, I would put things in the mail to them in a box and then I'd get it back. 3 weeks later, they'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do anything with this. Because the things that you can create with digital fabrication, often they're really difficult to create any other way.
Yes, that's true. This was very difficult.
Yeah.
So this is the piece getting its initial sort of cleaning off after coming out of the kiln, actually. And then that's their kiln in their studio in Red Hook. This is actually, because they did 2 because they were worried about breakage. So with, you know, this is like a, you know, molten hot glass.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then this is a sample of how the glass will be treated. It's not the final thing. We just made a little bit of the front of the face. So we could figure out if I wanted to do acid etched glass, which I do, so that, you know, it's going to have a kind of matte appearance. And we're very close to being done. But we started this like in March of the beginning of COVID, like the worst possible time. So it's taken us forever, right, to get to where we're going.
Yeah.
And then so the other project now in the works, which is the one that's also being done in Unreal Engine, this is a scan that is bilaterally dissected, and the left side that you're looking at my right, but your left looking, is my face, and on the other side is the face of my husband. So we are like married together here for eternity.
Did you ever see the Janine Antoni piece where her parents like melded it? She did a piece where
it was photographic, I think. Yes, she did it with the makeup.
But no, but she did like prosthetics, and she did like, but I love that idea of couples. Like, what does that look like?
Right. This was just playing around with, is it a matte thing or a shiny thing? And then we get to the next phase, which is I always make a small model, usually like a 10-inch model in plastic, and make decisions about anything that needs to be edited in Zbrush. You know, like, are there any mistakes? Are there any, I think in this one there was like a little problem behind the ear that we fixed. And now we're at the foundry in Philadelphia again. And we had a very mild problem with the lip. So I went down and we spent some time, we recast just the front of the face. And because where the face is joined together was a little tricky, right?
Right.
And so we recast that and manipulated it. And then this incredible person at the foundry made those changes to the original. And they were very tiny changes, but they made a difference in its appearance.
Yeah.
So it was all about trying to, this is Justin working in the foundry. So here's the, our original model to scale.
So cool.
Yeah, and us trying to get it finished and deal with this little lip problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then we come to, so this is the side of me, right? And it's so funny because his neck, kind of shows there on you can see here where it's a little funny kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring you to where, okay, so here now it's landed in New York. I'm going to make this bigger in my studio. And yeah, this is like, and this is also white bronze. It's the same material as the other sculpture, but it's not been high polished. It has a matte finish.
Right.
And this is similar in scale. I mean, I've based it on having the head from forehead to chin at roughly 10 inches when mine is roughly 7 in real life. So that's how much I've bumped up the scale.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's so, I mean, it's amazing to see this journey of a file too.
Yeah.
Like through all of these physical and digital iterations, and what that looks like and how it changes, and sometimes how a file looks on the screen versus what it actually looks like when it's made into something physical. Yeah, it's so different, and there's like a whole nother set of components. And I'm also curious to hear, if you're going to take any of these and like leave them in the digital space too. Like, how are you have all of these archives now? Like, how are you going to play with those?
It's so funny that you asked. One of the funny things that happened is that I worked on making a space in Hubs to show a bunch of work.
Okay.
And well, there are a couple of strange things happen. So 2 of the spaces are much more conventional, right? They basically, and this one is not functioning right now for some reason, the videos aren't working, but this is literally, here's a gallery with my video set up in it the way I would show it in a gallery, right? And this is a piece called Lita and the Swan.
Oh yeah, Lita and the Swan.
For people who haven't used it, it's a social VR platform built by Mozilla. And it allows you to navigate 3D spaces using just a web browser, so you don't need to install Unity or kind of third-party plugins or game software. And it's been really great for artists having virtual exhibitions. And there are some compromises in terms of your file size, but I know a lot of people have found it especially useful for video. Like moving image tends to look really great in Hubs.
And stills look really great. Photographs look really great. Yeah. So you're hitting upon exactly where I'm going, actually. So this other one also is just video. This one is functioning still. But the first one we worked on was kind of like the Uffizi meets a modern warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
And the space is really beautiful, right? And there are video rooms, there are these photographs, but here's where the problem came in. So the back room has the 2 sculptures I've made upscaled substantially, like a fantasy of how big you would like it to be. Mm-hmm. And in these niches are the other sculptures.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was, and this is again talking about the realization of something in concrete terms that comes from digital, is to get a sculptural object into Hubs, about which I know very little, it had to be rezzed down so much, like so much had to be removed.
Devastating. I've done
looked,
those and it's just like, oh.
they looked terrible to me,
Yeah.
right? And so then I thought, here we've built this space that is so beautiful and took so much time, and the photographs look great, and the videos look incredible, and the sculpture, which was the motivating force behind doing this, looks terrible. And if this was the first time I encountered my sculpture was in hubs as opposed to in real life, or even in a document that's a photograph, I wouldn't be interested in seeing them particularly, right? And that made me realize that, oh, this is a tool I can use privately, but if I make it public, I could be shooting myself in the foot.
Right.
So now part of the process, which I don't know how to do, of trying to make the sculptures look better after they've been, quote, dumbed down as much as possible so that they'll run in hubs, is baking the surface back, a detail back onto the surface, right?
Yeah.
And it's done in Arnold, evidently, right?
Yeah.
And so the person who was helping me with this, who disappeared on me and never finished, I don't know what, I mean, that's a whole other story. And also the Lita thing is not working and I have no way to fix it at the moment. But he, you know, as we were working together on Skype or Zoom or whatever we were doing, an image came up of the baking process flattened out, right?
Right.
As a 2D image. I was like, wait a minute, what is that, right?
Yeah.
So those...
Oh, the UV maps, yeah.
So these have actually become photographic images, right? And really they're just artifacts of a process that most people who are doing media would, it's sort of like detritus. It's not something somebody would normally, I think, set out to make this. Like when I first to get this image, it doesn't make any sense, right?
When I first saw UV maps, I was blown away.
Yeah.
So I now have a really beautiful image of each of the sculptures that was in that space. This is actually, believe it or not, here are the corona things here. The face is sort of very abstract. This is of that sculpture that's becoming glass. This one is of another marble, the second marble I did, that's a hybrid of my husband and I, but this time groin up, groin down. So it's like a hermaphrodite based on a sculpture at the Louvre called the Mazarin Hermaphrodite.
Yeah.
And then this is the Medusa, which I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to produce as a sculpture and what material it'll be in. One of the difficulties is that doing something in marble, I'm learning a lot about that, really is, it requires a skill level way beyond what's required to do anything else. It's
in the 3D,
you know, and there's maybe, you know, 2 people in the world who know how to really do it properly. It's really a complicated.
You mean the like sanding down the marble once it's been carved and
it's that part that most people don't really know how to do. So backtracking for 1 second, the hybrid creature, right? There's the writing has come back into play. It comes into play with the video I did of Medusa, which I can show you like 30 seconds of also. And it's now coming into play with hybrid, where there are 10 short written vignettes. And the conceit is that my husband and I have been uploaded into the same data container. And so I can see his memories, he can see my memories. We're in there kind of sharing this space together, and the conversations are me speculating about us being in that condition, about whether we have consciousness, about the fact that I can see things from before I was born because he's older than me, about just various stuff, right? And this is what is now being worked on in Unreal Engine. It's going to be a little bit of a tribute to Russian art because it's going to be one camera move from start to finish. And so this shows you a little bit the space. It's like a decrepit space, and there are 10 various, repetitions of the figure, and we move through this kind of derelict space, and each one talks. So it's about a 20-minute video, and that's, I could show you like one more maybe image from there. Let's find a good one. This is kind of a nice one.
That's so cool.
So this is, what we're currently working on together. It's been really fun, and it's again like, learning a new thing. Like, we won't have to go to a render farm for this. We won't have to do some of the stuff we had to do before that made, it very cumbersome to do the other motion capture videos. So that's kind of exciting. And
I love seeing the kind of pristine quality of that sculpt, like in this space, in this kind of more, this rough warehousey looking space, and even like the pedestal becoming the leftover furniture in that space.
Crap in there,
and but yeah, you've got, so I mean, you were talking a little bit about the canon of Western art and playing with that as a medium and or as a concept too within your work. So I think this is an interesting juxtaposition of that really eroding space. And there's something that's been, that discussion and what Western art history stands for has been eroding with the conversations and with people being, more kind of putting more spotlights on some of the less, the
colonial
aspects.
The disputed status of a lot of these artifacts. And I mean, I love the fact that your work is taking a longer view and in thinking about time and the archive, because these are questions, that are really preoccupy me as a photographer. The question of what are you capturing, what are you leaving behind, and sort of ideas around a legacy and a digital legacy. What trace do we leave behind digitally, and how are those things archived? And this was something that was brought up in connection with my work in Spring Break just a few days ago, and it really got me thinking, where the critic was talking about this paradox where, on the one hand, there's kind of this disposability to the data, we're generating massive amounts of data, but yet also we're going to have this stuff that sort of sits in landfill. That you have all of this stuff, but then data is also ephemeral, and yet maybe, what is the status of that future artifact? And so I think sort of casting into the future, even beyond our deaths as artists, and considering that time scale, that's really interesting. And I feel like something that comes naturally for a photographer, and maybe not so much for somebody who isn't engaged in that really specific time-based medium.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other irony of this is, this comes from, you buy an asset basically, and then you can work with it. People make these things, they build them. I'm going to say that I'm 99% sure that this is Chernobyl. It doesn't say in the asset, but I've seen pictures of Chernobyl, and I do believe that this guy who's Russian built this based on that. And I could be wrong, and I could always contact him and ask. But
like one of the schools, maybe.
It's I've seen images that are very similar to this of Chernobyl, and so it's also this idea of. I mean, it's sort of funny, like the Cold War enemy, and here I am, and how did I end up as a data set in there? But also just that this is a kind of, really almost like nuclear winter landscape.
Sorry, can you zoom in on this one too, Susan, so we can see some of the more of the details?
Yeah, I can show you a couple more images from here. The other really funny thing is that one of the walls has "Get Out" written on it, and I'm sure this guy saw that film. I mean, I really think that's why. So I mean, you see the little discarded gas masks everywhere, and
but I mean, it's really interesting because it's sort of bringing together a couple more of 3D as well, like the game. I
was just about to say that, Sophie.
Like Yeah, like Dave plays Bioshock, and you know
Bioshock, yes.
the post-apocalyptic, but then the kind of ultra high-end 3D fabrication. And so to have these two, it's like they're all swimming in the same digital stew.
Yeah. And of course, people buy this for gaming. They don't buy this to do this.
Yeah.
It's like not what the person who designed this was thinking it was going to be used for.
But it still kind of connects with what's happening in the gaming industry and connecting with NFTs as well, where you can purchase an object that then can be taken into your game or multiple games. That's the kind of dream, is that your asset can then be part of you, whether you go in one game or another game. And so this almost feels like you've discovered some sort of asset in this space, and that perhaps this has some sort of meaning, or it has some sort of treasure in it, or a power up or a level up. I'm not a big gamer, so I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use the correct term.
Yeah, I'm not either at all.
But I love the idea of the world building in games, and I love what that means for artists too in the future, and how we might be a part of that. Like, again, talking about digital archives and legacies, like that really is, that's also around the discussion of metaverse and, what it means to have a piece of art in the metaverse and all of that. But yeah, I think this kind of is connecting to those worlds. I think there's a really interesting narrative happening. And if you're doing Unreal Engine, you can do some sort of animation in there.
Yeah, because this guy will speak. He'll speak all the 10 vignettes. Or he, she, our hybrid person here. The other thing that's been interesting when we're moving the camera, because it's all one camera move, is that going from room to room, you're literally scanning the walls. So what happens is this transition from this built space with this 3D object in it to this weird kind of abstraction that's almost like painting, but not really, because the camera's just roving along like a cracked wall to get from one space to the next. So all of the transitions that would normally be edits are instead these kind of moving through space, but very tight images of an environment that's being abstracted, to the point of, just wall texture or whatever you're seeing. Sometimes it looks like maps almost. And so that's been interesting, that you sort of go in and out of this way of seeing the environment, and the guy did a great job building the environment. There's a lot of detail in it.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's amazing.
So the one last thing I have to show you here, we didn't do this exactly in order, but that's okay, is, so now I have a set also of digital drawings. Oh, I have two more things to show you.
Yay.
Okay. So this is Avatar Bending Forward, and I have 5 drawings I made. They're not very big, but when you see these as prints, the way the black ink sits on the paper is so sumptuous and luxurious. And everyone that's seen them, quote, in real life has gravitated to them because they're just really simple.
Yeah.
And here you have all this little sort of polygon structure or whatever is sort of underneath, lying under the skin, so to speak, right?
Do you know what shader that is and what program that's used? Is that Keyshots?
I don't, but I don't think so. I can find out from Clyde. I don't think so.
I was going to ask too, because we went through this with my video for spring.
I can find out.
Rendering, because I've done a lot of wireframe rendering, and sometimes I'll use the this was a tip I got from Micah, was to use the UV, actually just the UV set out of Blender, which will export as an SVG. That was mind-blowing, but this looks like a rendered shader because you've got the dimension.
Yeah, this is a shader. This is
orthographic UV projection.
Right.
Yeah, so this is 2D. Yeah, this is like Micah Gansky is my husband, and he did our video introduction. That I don't know if you saw that in the most recent one, but we have a new like animated intro. And I
know you guys are so fancy. I'm impressed.
I know. He whipped that up for us. It's beautiful. We love it. Thank you, Micah. Shout out to husbands.
You know, this is something I feel I can, you know, do with some of the other ones too. I mean, it just is it's a really simple thing and it looks really beautiful.
It's beautiful. I love it. It's very much like a painting.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the bathers, Degas, the bathers, you know, and just,
Angle.
yeah.
Yeah.
So again, there's this weird way in which here we have this indexical thing that started with the scan of my face, then it got distorted, then it got turned into potentially a glass thing, it got turned into a bronze thing, it got turned into what I call a drawing, even though it's not really a drawing. So it has all of these different possibilities once it's become an object file that are just kind of amazing to me.
Yeah, and this is something we've talked about. I feel like it's come up in almost every episode or every conversation, like that I used to have a tremendous insecurity about that question, and I would agonize. I'd have one model and I would feel like there had to be one correct output for it. And possibly that's from having like a conceptual art training where, you know, it's, again, kind of coming back to all these questions about fabrication. Like I went to Goldsmiths for undergrad and there was no hands-on fabrication learning. We had access to fabricators.
Right.
Like people would just make stuff in metal, you know, so that was your model. You had one idea and you'd go to the expert to make that. Another idea, you'd go to the expert to make that.
Right.
And then SAOC was actually really different. SAOC was very hands-on and very kind of much more making focused, which I felt that I needed for my grad program. But, you know, coming back to that, like having that mindset, I would never show a video and a sculpture from the same 3D model in the same exhibition because I felt like it made me look indecisive. Like, oh,
that's so interesting because I see it as just like a
I've
flourishing, right? Of here's my little model and look at all this stuff I made with it. I have a total opposite reaction.
No, the end of that is that I've absolutely made my peace with it because I've seen how it works with other digital artists, and every iteration is its own thing. You know, whether it's a video, whether it's a 2D print, whether it's, you know, a wireframe, they're completely different artworks, and it gives you, but what's really exciting and what we were also trying to get at with our chapel installation that we just had was this idea that there is this archetypal thing at the center of it, which is the data that you don't see. And you're encountering, you know, the shadows on the wall of Plato's cave, and every version, every fabrication of that data, and it's all different, and but it's all ways of getting at this invisible thing that's sort of at the heart of it. So that, yeah, that's been a real change for me, and something that I've learned to embrace was the idea that you can have a model, and I'll come back to scans. I mean, my last bas relief that's 2021 uses a 3D scan from like 2011 that I first made into a sculpture in 2014. So motifs kind of continue to recur, and I've absolutely embraced that now. I think that's great. I just needed to get over myself, is what I'm saying.
I think for me, I didn't have that struggle because I felt like, first of all, obviously I come from, quote, a conceptual background. I went to school, I was Michael Asher's TA. I mean, I really didn't come from the place where I'm a new media person and now I'm going to figure out how I'm making art in new media, which is sort of what painters do. I'm a painter, and then you figure out kind of what
you're going to paint.
I came from the tradition of, I'm going to figure out what material suits my idea, right? That's the training that I received. And so it feels less maybe like cheating to use these things again, perhaps, but also because I was so grounded in thinking about the index and thinking about iconicity and thinking about how in photography, those two things really overlap pretty neatly. And how, as you get into data, the index starts to get kind of slippery. Like the iconicity is still there. Like every one of these things still looks like me. Yeah. Right. Arguably. Yeah. But what is each thing referring to? Yeah. You know, it's like, what actually is the wireframe referring to? Is it referring to the substructure of the physical sculpture? Is it referring to just the data file? Is it referring to, and in all those cases, just as with Aging Venus, that photograph is really referring to the object file and not to the sculpture. But it's referring to both in a way, right? And both of them look like me. So
gets
all of
very-
that was so interesting to me as a dialogue amongst the things that it never occurred to me to feel in any way that it was a negative to use all of its manifestations. Like I was so excited actually to
Oh,
contact.
you're not defending this. This was like,
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying that didn't even cross my mind, right? Because I was coming from such a different place.
yeah.
So I'm going to show you one more thing.
Yeah.
And this again is a motion capture. And the thing that happens in this a little bit, just as background, is I shot a lot of photographs of myself that are fairly conventional photographs, self-portraits in a mirror. So this work refers to a lot of things, but also refers to my own earlier work.
I was adopted by feminists in the 70s and made to stand as a symbol for female rage. At the same time, I was presented as the embodiment of the fear of female desire. I like all that, but it doesn't quite fit my predicament or its genesis. I was beautiful once, but my beauty was stolen by Poseidon, who raped me in Athena's temple. Athena responded with fury to the desecration of her temple, and she took her fury out on me, not on Poseidon. Hardly a feminist parable. Athena transformed my hair into a head of seething serpents and my face into unalloyed ugliness. Those people, described as Musulman or Muslims in the concentration camps, whose faces were ashen and whose expressions were blank, who no longer met the gaze of others, who could still put one foot in front of the other, but whose souls had departed their concave chests. Those people were described by Primo Levi as having set eyes on me. No one talks about my ability to set eyes on myself. How did I really know my own ugliness? Was my isolation and the creation of endless death emanating from my gaze suggestive enough? Did I get a look at myself in the mirrored shield of Perseus? Is that really why he was able to decapitate me? Not because my gaze never met his directly, but because I saw myself reflected in the mirror. Like the horror of a beautiful woman in the moment when she first sees herself reflected back as an old woman. In that suspended moment of shock, Perseus might have found his advantage and lopped off my head. My severed head gave birth to a mighty white horse with wings. And Perseus could dangle my oozing head before his enemies. And even without my body, my power to bestow death remained undiminished. Later, Athena reclaimed me and attached my face permanently to a shield she carried into battle. And I continued to turn those who met my gaze into stone. In fact, I left behind fields filled with stone sculptures, as photorealistic as any 3D sculpture you could fashion today.
So that's
Amazing.
the Medusa.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, I mean, all of this stuff feels of a piece, to me, with each other, each manifestation of, like, I'm trying to figure out now whether I can make this Medusa sculpture in marble, which would require getting this one guy to agree to do it, and it's remains to be seen, or whether I should try to make it in glass, which is also very complicated, but probably easier than making it in marble. So it's, just trying to figure out where does this belong and how will it be manifested as a 3D object. And I'm continuing to make, regular video all along at the same time. So
Do you have a still of the Medusa head that we can see, like larger?
It's funny, I do, and I put it out for us, and then I
Oh no.
stuck it somewhere, who knows where. Let me just see.
Yeah.
It's scary, store all your stuff.
We love seeing everybody's files on File Exchange.
Oh,
This is part of the deal.
It's like, just, I had it out for you, and then I must have just decided edited it out the last minute, because I saw it this morning and the sort of pile of stuff, and I don't know.
No worries
But
at
there
all.
is, I have it on, oh, here maybe.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Success.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, ooh, that was not very bright, was it? All that looking, and then I got rid of it. But what's happening with that also is that if I did it in glass and I did it in the US, right? Because with the people I've been working with, they don't have a kiln big enough to cast it at the scale I would wish, right?
Yeah.
So what that would entail then is either casting it into 2 parts, or taking it to the Czech Republic to cast it in glass. And that has got me thinking a little bit about whether I might like sever the head somewhere and do like 2 different colors. Just thinking about what other things are possible if I was actually going to cut it in 2. But ideally, it would be a marble bust with white marble and black marble. But we'll see. It's very, very costly to do. And so I've also got a million grants out there for it, and without that, it's going to be a little tricky, and the competition is that kind of money is really tough.
I feel like this piece really speaks so well in the moving image, like with this animation. I mean, the moving of the snakes and this kind of storytelling that you're doing as well, with just, the framing Medusa in the context of feminist discourse over time is really interesting, and what that looks like, and the journey of Medusa, and how she was used, and for and I think that's really amazing that you were able to do that and still have, so you're doing this storytelling, but you also have this engaging imagery that's happening in the animation, in the mirror. I mean, personally, I think the medium of animation is really potent for this particular imagery. And I think it can have legs on its own just with that, without even having it in the physical. Because of that movement and that mirror reflection, I almost feel like this piece, it wouldn't have the same kind of uncanny experience, and if it was just a physical piece. But I can see it also being installed with mirrors and being like, so I see all of where, I mean, it's definitely, but I love the animation as a vehicle for projecting all of these ideas, which I think is what's so cool about files in general, is this idea that you can have, it creates, wow, the 7 train's really loud today.
I think your mic is turning it out, so that's good.
Okay, good. But
really so powerful. I mean, also, have you thought, maybe this is a separate kind of technical conversation for another day, so I don't want to take up more of your time, but have you thought about printing these, 3D printing in the translucent materials, or,
I haven't as much. I was just going to show you quickly that I also did a set of like 5 stills from there. I can show you that really fast, I think. hold on. Let's go to here. So these are slightly different views than you get in the,
yeah.
you know, so these would be photographs basically. So
Right.
that are, you know, not an accompaniment necessarily, but could be an accompaniment. So I've also thought about that aspect of it. There's only like 5 of them. But yeah, I think it's about trying to figure out what the material should be. The reason it started with marble is that the original inspiration was the Bernini Medusa. And so the head, right, has been completely modeled on that Medusa in Rome. Now, the Bernini Medusa has an unbelievably round face. It's like a bowl. It's crazy. So the hair had to be kind of, you know, settled around the frame of the size of my head, obviously. But essentially, if you look at that sculpture, you'll recognize right away it's completely lifted from that head. So partly because I think, you know, Bernini is so unbelievable, and that he was able to make stone flesh, right? That you could see the imprint of someone's thumb on flesh, and it's in marble, and it's unbelievable, right? It's just, I don't know.
So I want to go
mind-boggling, right? So, so it's a tribute in that sense. So it began by thinking about that, and the motion capture actually came afterwards in this case, right? Whereas with Eulogy, the motion capture preceded this whole thing. Yeah.
So it's so interesting to hear that. We're going to be excited to see where you take this one and where it ends up living, what
where it
material
lands, right?
Yeah.
It finally does. I'm hoping that one of these granting organizations will see fit to give me some money. But you know,
that's a whole part of the artist's experience is like, how do you fund these projects? And that's exactly, because it's very expensive, and you know, to produce physical works, whether it's, I mean, you know, I do at home 3D printing, so that's the way I'm able to produce, but then I can't produce at a scale. So if I wanted to produce at a certain scale, then I'd have to get funding. So yeah, no, it's definitely a reality that I think is important to talk about as well, kind of as we're wrapping up, because I think there's a lot of, and actually I think this ties back to what you were saying in the very beginning, Susan, about how the opacity in the art world that you experienced, but like that at this point, like artists using technology and digital tools are much more about this idea, this philosophy of sharing and about exchanging knowledge as opposed to hoarding it. I
think it's inherent to the media, because
you have to.
The art world is about scarcity and the digital world is about abundance. It's completely inherent to the actual material itself, that the philosophies would be completely different.
Yeah, and I know, and I'm hoping that the art world starts kind of maybe opening up to some of that, but I'm not sure if it's possible. I'm not sure if it's possible when the model, you're right, it's a scarcity model where the mythology, you know, mythologizing of certain artists that are in the 1% gets disrupted if you start bringing in this abundance.
Oh, absolutely.
And so then that whole model starts to crumble. If you take away that mythologizing, I mean, the artists that are not making as much money and that are not as high on the totem poles are actually the ones feeding that mythology for the 1%. So it's this very tricky kind of trickle down economics happening in the art world, where the lower echelons don't actually get anything, and are still feeding the fuel for the machine.
The low end of the food chain. I mean,
the other thing that I've noticed that's been really interesting for me, because I'm a little bit older than you guys, is that my experience in the art world overall has been one of the most extreme lack of generosity on the part of women toward other women.
Really?
Terrible. And because the pie is very small, the competition is really great. Now, there are a handful of exceptions of women who've been very good to me, but I can count them on.
Yeah.
Wow.
And consistently generous to me, but forget the rest of it. And actually, Claudia, who's somebody who has been very generous to me, is also much more in the new media world. And I noticed that the women who are in that world are much more inclined to help each other than women in the art world. And I find it really fascinating. And I think it's partly the structure of things, it's partly the abundance model, but it may be other things that I haven't even thought of. And it's not to say that no women ever help women.
No, but I found that. Yeah, I mean,
generous environment.
No, I think that it's not for a number of reasons, and not to completely just like say that any women who haven't been generous, that means that they're terrible people or something. I think that the model itself of what it takes to be an artist in the art world is a model that makes you less generous.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Then also, and if you're living in New York City, you know, the amount of money it takes to survive if you don't have a pile of money sitting around is really difficult to be able to, and there's a lot of illusions around what success in the art world looks like. You could have a gallery, you could have solo exhibitions happening and still not have enough money to pay your bills.
Absolutely.
So there's this, again, back to the scarcity of it, the grappling for opportunities and the lack of opportunities and lack of funding for the amount of artists that there are, it breeds that type of lack of generosity. And then not to mention the hierarchical structures which define what is good, what is bad, what is acceptable, what is not, are so prevalent that especially, and this is why I have kind of embraced, and technology has become more than just, in some ways it's become more than a tool, because it's like, it's been an entree into a community that I've always been searching for. I mean, I have been searching for somebody like Sophie, like my whole existence in the art world, and finally found somebody that I could, you know, because like both Sophie and I, we believe in the like lift each other up model.
Yes.
Yeah,
and Carla has been very generous to me.
But
Carla's also a new media artist. She's not this other thing.
What is that? I mean, I wonder if there's a curator out there or a writer out there who could tap into that. Maybe we'll bring that up when we have some writers on as well that are working in that. That's a very good question to kind of put out to the community too. What is that? Why is that?
I think you've hit on it. It's the scarcity model, and it's very, very important to the art world. And I also think that the gatekeeping structure is set up in such a profoundly forceful way that even like at some point recently I saw, you know, I don't know, it was Art News or wherever, it was like 10 young women curators, you know, to keep an eye on. So I opened this link and there are 10 unbelievably, you know, appealing, smart, educated, young curators. And almost every one of their shows that are listed are of well-known established men that they curated.
Yeah.
And it's not that they don't want to be feminists, it's that they know they're not going to make their career that way. If they do a show of some super successful male, that's their entree into the museum world, into meeting other important people, into meeting collectors, into meeting, you know, and so.
Well, yeah, it all
pressure. Yes.
It's a machine. It's the art world machine, and it feeds itself. And
heartbreaking that, you know, none of them had shows by women hardly. One or two did, but not many.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's something that I do feel like has been changing in the past few years. Like, but I mean, I think we have a lot of work, but it's a bigger pervasive issue. Yeah. It's a pervasive issue about what, like also, I mean, and this is why I've segued into the NFT space, and there's issues there, and there's a whole nother conversation to be had, but the agency that you're given as an artist is just, you cannot compare the experience of making NFTs and minting NFTs versus being an artist where you're not allowed to access your collectors because you're not good enough for those, even though you're making the art that's being sold to those collectors. That is below you. You are beneath that. Like the kind of
less you're beneath it, then you'll steal the sale from the gallery if you have a relationship.
But that also says that you'll steal the sale from. But what is that even? That whole mindset is
that paranoia,
that lack of trust. And you're going into this relationship without having a baseline respect for each other.
Yeah,
you know. And that is a structural issue. Whereas when you sell an NFT, you get the royalties, you get the majority of the sale, and the platform is only taking a small percentage.
Right.
And so it flips it. It flips the whole thing and gives artists an actual opportunity to fund themselves, as opposed to having to like always be like, oh, well, they've got to pay rent and they've got to this and that. Which, again, to just like say the other side of it, the gallery system is amazing too, in the sense that these spaces that are provided and the amassed amount, they do have to pay for rent and PR and teams and all of the stuff to do what they do. There's, you know, you can't underestimate that or just completely dismiss that. But it's yeah, it's a really interesting conversation to, I feel like, kind of wrap this episode up on, because I think it brings up a lot more questions and discussions, and hopefully the next generation of artists are starting to find new ways to rebuild and create new ways of showing art.
Yeah.
And lifting artists up.
Yeah. And also just this solidarity among women is very moving to me, because, you know, it's something that was not part of my coming up in the art world at all.
It wasn't part of mine either. And it was very, it was really challenging to understand how one could live a life that was thriving and be a generous human and be a part of the art world at the same time. There was always this question of how do I...
Cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
Like, I want to be a good person. I want to live by these values. And I am daily dealing with people who hold completely opposite values to the values that I have. And how do you reconcile that? You know, I mean, I will say I was very lucky to have Claudia, who we've talked about.
Yeah, you had a wonderful mentor.
Through school. And so she was so fortunate. She's somebody who's built an amazing context around 3D in terms of her
absolutely
colleagues, but also realizing that was, you know, not the majority experience. And it's certainly, you know, my undergrad was not like that in any way. And we should wrap it up, because I think
I know we've really gone on.
Guys, this has been great. Well, obviously if you wanted to edit it down a little, you can also, you can figure that out.
I never can.
But I'm really honored to be part of this, and I think the women you've interviewed so far have been just fantastic, and it's really a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for being part of this, and for, you know, opening up all these really amazing conversations for people out there to hear and be a fly on the wall with. And I think that's going to hopefully lead to other conversations in future episodes. And we can't wait to see what else you've been up to. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys too.
Printing too. Let us